Welcome to Pinnacle Performance Company's Fishbowl Friday with Pinnacle co-founder and COO G. Riley Mills and master instructor and editorial director Brad Lawrence. In an exclusive edition of Fishbowl Friday featuring G. Riley Mills' new book, Synergy and Sparks.
Let's talk about pillar number 2, which is presence and executive presence. This is a term that gets thrown around a lot in the professional world. How do you define presence, and how should we define presence? How does Pinnacle define presence, and why is it more than just confidence? Like people, I think those two terms get interchanged a lot, but presence is more than confidence. Would you agree?
Yes,
Okay.
and I think to your point, you and I have been doing this work together for almost 20 years. We've been doing this work. And in the early days of Pinnacle, if we were to define executive presence, I think confidence is probably
top of the list,
right? When we think of a leader who has executive presence, they have confidence. I definitely agree that is an important element. However, as time has gone on, we've definitely evolved our concept of executive presence to include things like humility. Do you admit as the leader when you make mistakes, or you always right just because you're the leader? So humility, receptivity. Do you listen to other people's ideas, or do you have to always be the loudest person in the room? Authenticity, like bringing yourself to your communication and your leadership. That's an element of executive presence. Irving Goffman, who I write about in the new book, was a sociologist. And in 1956, he wrote a book called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, where he said, we are all social actors, meaning we change our delivery and our approach and our word choices depending on where we are, who we're talking to, and what we want in that situation. So way back in 1956, he came up with this idea that, hey, what actors do, it's kind of what people do in real life. And there's something called signaling theory, which is your body is a billboard, and when you're communicating with another person, you're sending out messages to that other person, and you're signaling to them how you want them to feel about you and the information. And so that idea that Irving Goffman brought up, that we're all social actors and that we adjust and modify our communication and our delivery based on who we're talking to, that's what professional actors do. So that's what Pinnacle does. Obviously, that's what we've been doing for 20 years. But I thought that was so interesting going all the way back to the 50s, that idea of the actor's mindset. Because at Pinnacle, obviously, we don't teach acting at Pinnacle.
Nope.
But we teach the actor's mindset, how to prepare, how to influence emotion to motivate action in a meeting or presentation. And that's what they were talking about all the way back in the 1950s.
And I feel like that would be really encouraging to somebody who's thinking about executive presence and they don't know how to attack it. The good news is you've been doing it your whole life.
Yes.
You just didn't know it, or you weren't conscious of it, right?
Yes.
When you go out with your family, that's different than when you go out with your friends, and
Right.
it's, right? Who you're talking to, where you're talking to them, that's going to obviously change the way you communicate. We're just asking you to be more conscious of it.
And are you doing it well?
Right.
Or are you doing it correctly? Because you may be sending out signals that are the wrong signals. For example, if you're presenting information to a team or findings and it's good news, you want them to feel really good about what you just discovered, but you're doing it in a monotone voice and you don't really care, and it seems like you don't want to be there, and this isn't really that important or interesting, that's not going to help get your message across. So that's signaling theory, and that's what Pinnacle does, is we make sure we adjust all those what we call intention cues to make sure that you're delivering that message with impact.
Yeah, it's fascinating what happens to people when they know they're being scrutinized, when they're being put under the spotlight.
Yep.
Something that's effortless and instinctive, like you were talking about, suddenly requires conscious thought. And when that little switch flips, things get complicated. They get
And
more
we always have to, at the Pinnacle training, when we're doing a workshop or coaching, and they hear that a lot of our backgrounds are not only business, but also professional actors, professional performers. They say, well, what good is that? Because that's just lying. Acting is lying. Acting is not being truthful. Do you want me to lie and pretend to be somebody I'm not? No, that's not what we're talking about at all. It's the actor's mindset, is understanding your objective. What are you trying to accomplish? Understanding your audience. How do you want them to feel? And then executing on it with that signaling theory, with your body language, your voice, your gestures.
Yeah, we both went to theater school. I don't know how they defined it at yours, but at my school, they described acting as truth under imaginary circumstances.
Love it.
I think
Yeah.
that's Stanislavski, actually. Truth under imaginary circumstances. And I think that applies to the work that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
for sure.
We don't want you to be fake or somebody that you're not. We don't want you to be forcing it. You still got to be true to yourself, the
Yes.
authenticity that
For
you
sure.
mentioned, but it's under different circumstances.
Absolutely.
Not imaginary
Yeah, yeah.
circumstances, but different
Yeah,
circumstances.
and we don't want anybody to be a robot
Yeah,
doing
no.
it one way. Like if you play Hamlet, it's going to be different if I play Hamlet, right? And that's the goal. That's what makes it so great.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.